Hello, my name is Paul Vick. In 1944, my parents, Robert and Dorothy Vick, were commissioned as missionaries to China by the American Baptist Foreign Mission Society.
On December 15, 1946, my parents, along with my older brother Teddy and me, left aboard a converted troop ship arriving in Shanghai on December 30, 1946. Our story, which I will tell you about here, encompasses more than just the story of one family. It's also the story of the mission engagement in China over the past 120 years. It's the story about the American Baptist missionary family. And it is a story that reveals that seeds the very first missionaries planted paved the way for my parents, and ultimately for me too. The first part of my story will tell you about my parents and their call from God to be missionaries. It will also tell you about a plane crash in which all my family and the other 24 passengers died, and I was the only survivor. I was only 15 months old. The second part of my story will follow my own journey 65 years later, when I returned to China to complete the journey that we, as a family, never finished. I was always aware that what happened to me and my family was larger than just one tragedy. But returning to China and uncovering the answers to decades of unanswered questions really drove this home. While I don't have conscious memory of my parents, I do feel I know them very well. Although everything I know is through the eyes of others, and although their presence is very real to me, answers to critical questions that no one can answer became, over time, an increasingly driving force in my life. Why did my parents do what they did? And why did they focus on China, a place so dangerous and so remote? Did their lives and deaths serve any purpose at all? And finally, did the missionaries have any effect on the China of today? It took me nearly 65 years to be in a position to find the answers to these questions. In 2011, my wife Joyce and I met Ben Chan, Area Director for East Asia and India, and Stanley Chow, owner of a film production company in Hong Kong, in Beijing. From Beijing, we began to trace the January 1947 journey of my family. We traveled to Nanjing, Shanghai, Chaoxing, and Wuhan, ending in the small village of Pengbei, approximately 8 miles from the city of Tianmen, where the plane crashed. With the help of the local church, we discovered the location of the plane crash and met the villagers who had saved me and given me my Chinese name of Pang Balo. These remarkable people kept me alive until arrangements had been made to evacuate me from the Catholic mission in Tianmen, where I had first been taken, to a hospital in Shanghai, and eventually returned to my father's family in Rochester, New York. This was a meaningful discovery on its own, but finding the crash site and meeting the villagers only deepened my question: why did my parents feel the call to come here? In 2015, we returned to China. Just prior to our arrival, we were informed by members of the local China Christian Council that the location of the cemetery in which my family had been buried in Wuhan had been discovered. Digging deeper, we discovered that some of the gravestones in the International Cemetery were recently uncovered during some pre-construction work near the site. I felt the need to travel there immediately in case my family's graves were uncovered, moved, or even destroyed during construction. As we flew across the world, I couldn't help but wonder, was I finally going to find their graves after all this time? And if this was the site of the International Cemetery, was my family really buried there? On the day we arrived, we were so eager to find the location of the cemetery, we tried to find it ourselves without any help from locals. We came up short, of course. Conflicting stories from people who had lived in the area all their lives gave us a scattered picture of what might have happened.
八国分院，现在都撤销了，没有了。以后这200年炸了以后呢，都平了，平了以后呢，做了市场，这怎么样？这现在都没有了。
From these locals, we found that the International Cemetery had been destroyed. After it was bombed by the Japanese, the rubble and debris were cleared and the land turned into a wet market which operates there today. The information left me discouraged. Would I never find out what happened to my family? After, on our way back to our hotel, we stumbled across the hotel we stayed at during our last trip 3 years ago. We couldn't believe that we had been so close to the probable site of the cemetery at that time. Were it not for the newspaper article about uncovering the tombstone, we might never have gotten even this close to finding the burial site of my family.
When we started this journey in 2011, we're standing before the hotel that we stayed at, and it's just a matter of coincidence that the hotel we're now staying at is just about 2 blocks down. So it was providential that we stayed here, not knowing that this was the area in which the cemeteries were located.
We gathered at the construction site where Sarah, her husband, and pastor from the Chungnan Theological Seminary believed was the site of the International Cemetery. Finally, we had it confirmed that this is the site of the International Cemetery.
我从我记事的时候，从5岁开始就知道大花园，因为我家里就在对面去，这个农学的正对面，我在前面长军街去。我们小时候呢，从5岁到12岁这个阶段呢，我们经常在这儿玩，几乎天天在这里玩，捉迷藏啊，什么做些游戏啊，在这里玩。所以说呢，对大花园的情况比较了解。这个墓地我是好像看见过的，这个墓地好像就是你的爸爸妈妈，还有哥哥。 他们的墓地好像看到过，但是当时我不认识外文，不知道他是谁，对不对？我只记得这个墓好像这个宽度啊，大概有将近2米，1.6米到2米，高度大概80到1米这么高墓地了，这么高。对，这是用花岗岩摆的，当年是用大理石的石子，我好像在这里面玩过的。
Some of the locals we talked with had played in the cemetery as children. They had called it then the Big Garden because it was filled with many flowers and trees. I liked that. It made me glad to think that this place, that could be filled with such sadness, had brought joy to local children. With their help and some old photos, we found out the position of my mother, father, and brother's graves.
Wow, it's, as I said last night, I'm so thankful that you are here and sharing this with me.
I'm thankful that we can leave this history to the children and grandchildren.
Yep, I am too. No, it's, and I hearken back to that poem, Do not stand at my grave and weep.
I did not die, I merely sleep.
Yeah.
I am 1,000 winds.
Yeah. When the families were considering what to do with the remains of those who died, they decided that all the missionaries should be buried here. And it was true not only for those who died in the crash, but it was true for all missionaries, or most missionaries, who served in the field in China. There's a small graveyard in the community of Yibin where we will be visiting, where the missionaries who served in that mission station are buried for the very same reason. Because they were called by God to be here, their remains should stay here and symbolically become a part of the soil to give birth to new life to nurture seeds that their lives represented in the spread of the gospel in China.
Finding the graves of my family mean more to me than I can ever say. Tomorrow we continue our journey and visit Chengdu, the West China Union University where my parents were supposed to study local dialect and Chinese culture. So far, we have not found any contacts in the university who knew about the missionaries who had studied there at the time my parents were to have arrived. I do have one lead, a book given to me by the daughter of a missionary who had died in the same plane crash as my family. She had grown up in the mission field in Chengdu and had been presented with the book in 2010 when she had visited there. The book gave us a detailed history of the university. I'd like to find the author, but now that we are here, that feels a bit like finding a needle in a haystack. Incredibly, we met a pastor last night who knew the author of the book I had on the university's history, and she is a professor at Sichuan University. The pastor contacted her and she said she could take us there. This felt like a big step in my journey, and like the discovery of the burial site of my family, miraculously appeared just at the moment I needed something firm to stand on. Arrangements were made to meet Dr. Chang. Although not a Christian, Dr. Chang had undertaken considerable research into Christian mission activity in West China and the long-term effect of that activity on the growth and development of West China. We were blessed that someone so knowledgeable committed a day and a half of her time to guide us through the university and provide us with more history. The university preserved most of its old buildings, so as we walk around, I can easily envision how it would have looked if my parents had studied there.
华西协和大学它由4个国家5个基督教的差会，那它的中文名字是华西协和大学，那英文名字就是 West China Union University。这张照片摆成2个 U 字形 ，Union University。Union United 就意味着华西的精神之一就是团结，所以后来它的校训里面就有一条叫精诚团结。
At the same time as the formation of the West China Union University, medical missionaries also began to work in the outlying areas of this province, one of which was establishing hospitals and schools in Yibin, where my parents were eventually to be stationed. As the Chinese were educated and prepared for further work in especially medicine and dentistry, they would then come to the West China Union University and gain the medical knowledge and skills necessary which would allow them to come back to Yibin and take over the leadership and the running of the hospitals and schools within Yibin. So this university really played a key role in preparing Chinese to meet the medical needs of the people in West China who heretofore had absolutely no medical care. So it was really played a critical role in bringing health to those in prior times had no access to this type of care. Coming to this university for me is, in a sense, fulfilling a journey that my parents were on. They were unable to come here because of the airplane crash. But now, some 68 years later, I am able to fulfill the vision that they had of coming here to this place. To me, this is a very sacred ground, for it was a ground that they were called to serve. And even though physically they did not make it here, their spirit resides here and continues to inspire.
On our way out, we saw some university students taking graduation pictures. I couldn't help but think of my parents. I could easily envision them here, happy and so proud to have studied at this very university. Looking at students today, the hopes for their future so easily reflected on their young, eager faces.
Now that you have graduated, what do you hope to do?
I hope to be a chemist.
Actually, I will work for a global company, PepsiCo. I think you all know that. Yeah, PepsiCo.
I will work for a medicine company in Chengdu.
I could see why my parents had given up so much to come here. Like young people all over the world, in every era, the challenges to overcome in pursuit of their dreams just don't seem important. After this, we had to hurry to reach Yibin, which was one of the sites of the earliest American Baptist missions in China. I was anxious to get there. Yibin was the place my parents were supposed to have served and where I would have lived. I hoped that finally seeing it in person might bring me full circle. As one of the earliest mission sites, Yibin also holds a lot of history, and I was eager to understand how our story fit into a larger context. Our first American Baptist missionaries made the arduous and treacherous journey to this remote city some 1,800 miles from Shanghai in 1888. Situated in the mountainous Sichuan province, the city was described as surrounded by great dark grim walls, and at less than a mile square contained some 200,000 people. Over the next 60 years, hostility and mistrust of any Western presence, combined with nearly constant warfare, often led to persecution and sometimes death for the missionaries. At times when the danger peaked, the missionaries temporarily retreated, but always came back with more people and stronger mission work than ever before. Starting with the church in Yibin, the gospel spread to towns and villages where schools and clinics were set up, eventually serving nearly 40 towns and villages in the surrounding country. 2 hospitals were built, one for men and one for women and children. Over time, 6 schools were also built, serving children from kindergarten through high school. Often these schools provided the only educational opportunity for the local population, as well as the only health care in that part of Sichuan province. By the 1940s, many missionary personnel had either retired or died. Around that time, a call went out to the American Baptist family seeking to continue and build on the evangelistic, medical, and educational work already established in Western China. A young couple from Upper New York State responded to that call to serve in this city of Yibin. They were my parents. Soon after the plane crash that took my family, missionaries were expelled from all over China. What happened to all the churches, schools, clinics, and hospitals? Are they gone forever? Are there any buildings or remains there? What are we going to find? Yibin, a place I had read so much about, but really know so little. It was the first time for all of us traveling there that day. Borrowing a minivan from the local church, it took almost 3 hours to get there. On the way there, I couldn't help but wonder what we would find. Would we come back empty-handed? The pastor of the Yibin church was scheduled to meet with us and take us to some of the places we wished to go. But for all I knew, those places no longer existed. Our driver, a brother of the church in Chengdu, drove us to a mysterious facility upon our arrival. Thinking we would go to the hotel first, we were surprised to see a group of people waiting for us in the parking lot of a tall building. This turned out to be the Yibin Hospital, now a part of one of the largest hospital groups in West China, established by the American Baptist Mission in 1916. Then it was called the Rende Hospital for men and boys, and another hospital, the Minde Hospital for women and children, was built the same year. Later, a nursing school was also built. Here, on our immediate arrival to Yibin, and received like returning celebrities, we can literally see the history of the American Baptist missionaries in the stones at our feet, placed during one of the most difficult times in China. It is a fantastic beginning and leaves us eager to know what we will see next.
我想也不是我太喜欢，为什么？因为神更喜悦我们和我们的家人。圣经告诉我们，人若不看顾自己的亲属。
Parents have felt God's call to come to this community.
After worship, we went to visit a meeting place in a small town, one of the many served by Yibin Church. Every Sunday, 2 of the 3 pastors of the church would go to one of these meeting places to preach and to train Christians there, all across the 4 regions of Yibin. Seeing this in person brings many things to light. I can see how the earliest missionaries worked hard and made sacrifices to make connections and reach people in need in whatever way they could. I can also see how my parents would have fit into the community here, and I can imagine how glad they would have been to be given the chance to make those connections.
We've just experienced a very joyful occasion, a time when there was much laughter and fellowship in just a short period of time. It is truly a wonder that what God can do in the hearts of women, children, men, when they begin to know and understand the love that God has for them. And that expression is all around us within this small community that has gathered and is soon to grow with the building of a new church. So we give thanks and praise for what the Spirit is doing here today.
This is our last day in Yibin. My heart overflows with joy from what I have experienced here. And today we are visiting the second high school of Yibin, previously called the Monroe School, which translates to American Chinese High School.
04年就是北美教会创的华美中学堂，从城里边迁到南岸，在这里买了5亿亩地，修了这个学校。然后这个门呢，就是当时的校门。学生们从城里边坐渡船过来之后，沿着河滩石阶路走上来，进入到学校进行学习。应该说当时在南岸最好的这个学校就是我们当时的明德中学，当时叫华美中学堂。后来27年国民政府收回来之后，才由中国人来担任学校的校长。前期呢有4位都是美国浸礼会的基督教的传教士担任学校校长。在解放前，这个学校应该说整体在宜宾的教育当中都属于排在前列。当然现在学校呢也发展比较好，老学校主要就是初中教育，然后我们有新校区来进行初中、高中6年一贯制的教育，学校呢得以进一步的发展。
In 1904, American Baptist missionaries started a number of schools, one of which was known as Monroe Academy. Initially, that school was a school for girls, but over the years, gradually became a co-ed school for junior high and high school students. The school we visited earlier today has grown to a population of about 1,000 students. That school has been increasing at such a rate that they needed to expand. And approximately 10 years ago, 100 acres was given the school to establish a more modern school for junior high and high school, with the old school now becoming primarily a junior high school. About us, you will see the campus of this new school that sits on about 153 acres. About 3,800 students attend this campus. 3,000 live in the dorms on this campus. But you can see what a magnificent facility this has become. And the legacy of the American Baptists is well recognized, as they have periodically plaques commemorating how this school was started. But the school that started to educate young people in this area has grown beyond any expectation and represents the school that is here today. This journey started in 2011 as a personal pilgrimage to discover what my family encountered when they came to China in 1946 and into 1947 as missionaries commissioned by the American Baptist Foreign Mission Society to be stationed in West China. In 2011, we followed the path my family took in traveling toward their mission assignment, arriving in Shanghai and traveling eventually toward Chongqing until the plane crashed in near a small city in Tianmen, just 90 miles west of Hankou, which is now part of Wuhan. On this journey, we have just experienced, I was able to complete the journey that my family was unable to complete by traveling to Chengdu, where they were to study Chinese dialect for a period of time before they traveled down to Yibin to take up their station with the other missionaries who were involved with the medical and educational programs, as well as the evangelistic work in traveling to the more rural and remote villages, sharing the gospel of the good news of Jesus Christ. The experience for me has been a tremendous revelation, and it has been an experience of understanding why my parents were called to do what they were called to do. My father's mother wrote soon after his death, "We have received many beautiful letters from young people whose lives Bob had touched as he moved among them during his camp experiences and deputation work. He thought he was marking time waiting to go to China, where he had a burning zeal to serve. We know now he was accomplishing his life's work then. The work in China cannot die. It will not die. Their spirit will work through others to take up the torch where they laid it down." Those prophetic words have been borne out as we witness the growth of Christianity in China today. Our role as American Baptists, however, has changed. Our role now is to try to give support to and help train the leadership in ways that they, in turn, can go out and spread the gospel message. What this journey has shown me is that what the missionaries were able to accomplish was the planting of the seeds of the love of Christ within the hearts of people. These seeds have continued to survive and thrive even during times of great difficulty. And although my parents never made it to Yibin, their role in the larger story is not trivial nor forgotten.
and I see now they weren't alone in the sacrifices they made. Missionaries all over the world, of every faith and era, leave the comforts of home to make arduous journeys. Some, like my parents, never get to see what their lives were worth. But those of us who continue this great work do. Once the people of China were allowed to openly worship again and spread the gospel message, God has nurtured, and God has embraced, and God has furthered the work of these people in ways that are now rekindling the knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Now our role is to find new ways to support the development of leaders within these communities so that the work can continue to grow and expand.